A massive cargo ship vanishes in a raging typhoon.
It's a fantastic mystery how a ship nearly 1,000 feet long could just disappear.
Authorities blame captain and crew, but not everyone is convinced.
I trusted the crew. They wouldn't put their lives in danger. We'll prove it.
Their evidence lies at the bottom of the world's deepest ocean.
Look at that.
What's uncovered, no one expected.
The ship did something which is to implode and then explode.
For sure, 44 of them were all alive as she went into Typhoon Orchid. For sure, they're all dead. How did that happen?
September 8th, 1980. The MV Derbishyre is passing through the Western Pacific en route to Japan. Captain Jeffrey Underhill is in command of the massive ship. The 47-year-old father of two is in charge of every detail of the Derbishyre's operation and its crew of 42.
Morning, Curly.
Morning, Captain.
Have the MEP reports come in?
Yeah, I have them right, yeah.
Jeff Underhill, or Gavoo, as he was nicknamed by everybody because that was his initials, was a very competent seafaring master. As far as his personality went, he liked to control by consensus.
Nigel Malpass served aboard the Derbishyre as chief officer. He knows the ship and her crew very well.
Derbishyre was a wonderful ship to sail on. She was almost like brand new. There was hardly any wear and tear on her, and things worked. Unless you've actually sailed on one, it's hard to visualize how big they were, but they were really massive.
At 294 meters, the Derbishyre is longer and twice the weight of the Titanic. Her 9 cargo holds have a capacity of 160,000 tons, and the bridge deck is 10 stories high. A ship of this size can take more than 3 kilometers to stop and over 1 kilometer just to turn. The Derbishyre is a bulk carrier. Her huge holds can be filled with anything from grain to crude oil. But on this trip, she's carrying 157,000 tons of iron ore. After leaving Canada and passing around the southern tip of Africa, she's now just a few days from her final destination, Kawasaki, Japan. Because of her size, she's had to take the long way around.
She was called a Cape-size ship because she was 145 feet wide and drew 60 feet of water and was just simply too deep to go through either the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal. So she had to go beneath the capes. Cape Horn, Cape of Good Hope, into some of the roughest waters of the world.
By now, ship and crew have been at sea for more than 2 months. Most are experienced seamen, including 19-year-old deckhand Peter Lambert. This is his 2nd year at sea, and he loves it.
You couldn't stop talking about it. Loved it. You know, I always feel a seafarer is born. You can't make one.
You form very close bonds with the seafarers that you're with. Your life at times depended on it.
Ship's crew is like a family because they're on the vessel for extended periods of time together.
Yes, you can just set it there.
An unusual but well-appreciated company perk allows wives to travel with their husbands.
Thank you, that's perfect.
24-year-old Anne-Marie Hutchinson is one of the 2 wives on board. So far, the voyage has been uneventful.
Captain,
Anything exciting?
a little too exciting.
Chief Officer Curly Bayless delivers weather forecasts predicting a fast-moving storm. Typhoon Orchid is heading their way.
The Western North Pacific has this nickname of Typhoon Alley, and that's because the typhoons that form there can be upwards of 300 to 400 miles across, tremendous winds upwards of 100 miles an hour, generating tremendous waves, very destructive force.
To avoid danger, Underhill needs to keep his ship at least 320 kilometers from the storm. But there's a problem.
He received 3 weather reports, one from Guam, one from Tokyo, and one from Hong Kong, and each one had given Typhoon Orchid a different location.
Brilliant. 3 forecasts, all different.
With conflicting weather reports, Captain Underhill has to make his best guess how to dodge the storm.
Still have to rely on your expertise, your knowledge base, in being able to identify where you are in relation to the storm.
Both the typhoon and the ship are moving. Figuring out how to avoid the storm is an enormous challenge.
Being the sensible seafarer that he was, he would have said, right, that's 3 typhoons. He wouldn't have tried to second guess which was the right one. He altered course to the north and the east to avoid all 3.
If we maintain a good speed, we should be able to sneak through here.
You want to make a plan that if I can keep this course and this speed over the next 24 hours, it may pass behind me. I might catch some of the weather, but I won't bear the brunt of it.
Let's make sure the ship is secure, yeah?
Yes, sir.
This is the captain speaking. Looks like the weather's getting worse, so please take care till the storm abates and make sure the ship and your cabin are secure.
It was a procedure within the company that as you approached bad weather, you would go through the procedures of battening down ventilators, putting canvas covers on them, and basically checking that everything was snug and ready to take any kind of sea.
Sailing in heavy weather is part of life at sea. It's just part of the job. That's not to say that you take it lightly.
One of the most important tasks is to batten down the hatches, large and small. Peter Lambert is still learning the ropes.
Make sure you do it nice and tight.
Everybody adores him. Everybody loves him. He'll help you. No matter what you need doing, he would help you.
Captain, we're down to 8 knots.
Within hours, it's clear the captain's plan isn't working. Despite their change of course, they're hitting heavy weather. The swelling seas are already making it hard to keep up their speed.
Autopilot off. Let's see if we can make some better headway.
Conditions continue to worsen. An unexpected shift in the storm's direction has put them directly in its path. Through the night, wind speeds reach up to 80 kilometers per hour, and wave heights soar to more than 7 meters.
Gentlemen, looks like we'll have to tough this one out. Heave to, please.
Heaving to. Keep the wind light on the starboard bow.
Turning to port, keeping the wind light on the starboard bow.
What the captain wanted to do at the time was to adjust his heading and his course such that he was taking the waves right on his starboard bow, because that will cause the ship to just rise and fall but along her length, but not roll and not pitch.
As the center of the typhoon closes in, winds have increased to 100 kilometers per hour and wave heights to more than 10 meters. These are conditions that few people have experienced at sea.
The wind is very loud. It's roaring, basically. The ship is pitching. Very little visibility, and generally an unpleasant situation to be in.
There's little else to do but endure the violent motion of the ship.
It has a long-term effect over days of that on the crew. It's exhausting. The fatigue sets in because nobody really sleeps, particularly if you're really battered in some heavy seas. Captain Underhill probably didn't leave when the weather really picked up, because he has to be there, he has to see what's going on. It's just continued vigilance all the time, a weary vigilance.
Radio our position to Liverpool.
As they enter their second night of the storm, the Derbishyre radios her position to shore and checks in with a nearby ship.
This is the Derbishyre. How are you enjoying the weather?
Loving it. Even better when we meet up in Tokyo. Seeing you there in a day or two.
William McCrone was on a container ship heading to the same port in Japan.
Actually, we're talking to the Derbishyre on the VHF at the time, and he made arrangements to meet the guys on board because there's a nightclub in Tokyo called Fufu's in Roppongi. We're all going to go up the road and have a night in Fufu's, but unfortunately, it never happened.
20 degrees starboard.
20 degrees to starboard, Captain.
Easy does it.
By now, more than 2 days of unrelenting gale force winds have whipped the waves to monstrous heights. Then,
We're gonna feel this one.
the scream of twisting steel can only mean one thing.
We're losing her. We're gonna lose her. Abandon ship. Abandon ship. Abandon ship.
It would be only in the last few seconds they would have realized what was happening.
Five days later, Typhoon Orchid has finally dissipated. But no one has heard from the Derbishyre, not even a mayday call.
Come daylight in the morning, the container terminal, you could hear helicopters, and we looked around, the Japanese Coast Guard were just coming over us, the helicopters, and they're all heading away out to sea to go and start the search for the Derbishyre.
Their hope that in a vast ocean, the lives of 44 people can still be saved. 11 days after the last radio call from the MV Derbishyre, an exhaustive search by the Japanese Coast Guard has found no survivors. An oil slick is sighted 45 kilometers from the Derbishyre's last position, but no sign of the largest British ship lost at sea.
It was a fantastic mystery as to how a ship of nearly 1,000 feet long could just disappear.
All 44 passengers and crew are presumed dead. Among them, 19-year-old deckhand Peter Lambert. His family are devastated.
You know, my mother, she was totally destroyed. And she kept on asking why. Why Peter? Why did the ship sink? How did he die? Why?
The sinking is attributed to Typhoon Orchid and written off as an act of God. But not everyone is convinced.
Why would a sensible, well-found ship suddenly disappear quickly without any distress signals?
Yeah, I just said, Mother, I promise you I'll find out how the ship sank, why it sank, and why Peter lost his life on it. I promise you I'll do that.
Wasting no time, a 28-year-old Paul Lambert reaches out to the National Union of Seafarers.
What I wanted to ask you about was actually Derbishyre.
I think you should take a look at this.
Different ships have been going down, and nothing was getting done about it. Derbishyre was the same.
All the same type of freighters.
Lambert learns a shocking number of bulk carriers have been sinking.
On average, one bulk carrier sank every 6 to 7 weeks with total loss of life. The era of the Coffin ships, that's how he classed it.
Lambert is convinced the lives of other seafarers are in danger, but he can't get anyone to act until another accident, 6 years after the tragedy, changes everything.
The turning point was in 1986 when the Derbishyre sister ship, the Cowling Bridge, got in difficulties in the Irish Sea.
There was major cracking at a bulkhead right in front of the deckhouse at frame 65.
The Derbishyre is one of 6 sister ships designed with steel beams along the length of their hulls to add strength. But during construction, the girders are joined at frame number 65, creating a potential weak point. Now, 3 of the 6 ships have had something go badly wrong at sea.
For the Derbishyre families and many people looking at the ship, seeing an obvious structural flaw in a ship that disappeared made them think that probably what caused the Derbishyre to sink was a flaw at frame 65. This began to look like the smoking gun.
The families fear that if a design flaw did cause the disaster, other lives could be at risk.
We're losing her! We're gonna lose her! Abandon ship!
It's not just what happened to Peter. Something had to be done.
Yes, hello, it's Paul Lambert again. Have you had time to review that information I sent you?
Lambert uses the suspicions about frame 65 to convince government officials to re-examine their conclusions. But after 2 years of investigation and 9 years after the tragedy, they once again conclude Typhoon Orchid is to blame for the loss of the Derbishyre.
The findings were an act of God.
It's a verdict the families refuse to accept.
Derbishyre sank twice. 1 in the South China Sea, 2 in the Sea of Whitewash.
And once you have a look at this,
Lambert decides the only way they'll get a proper investigation is if the families of the victims take matters into their own hands.
we're not going to know the truth unless we find it ourselves.
Their first task is to find the wreck.
They had to work out and extrapolate where roughly they thought the vessel was based on where the oil slick had been discovered by the Japanese Coast Guard.
The search area encompasses some of the deepest waters in the ocean, reaching depths of more than 5 kilometers.
In those days, there was very limited capabilities to really search large areas of the seafloor, and for the most part, the wreck was thought to be unfindable.
Undaunted, Lambert and the other families of the crew do something that's never been done before. They raise enough money to launch a short 8-day search, and they get lucky. 14 long years after the tragedy, on the 5th day of the expedition, they confirm the location of the wreck.
We found the Derbishyre. It blows your mind, honest to God. We know where she is. We know where the graves are. 44 people.
With news of the discovery, 42-year-old Lambert demands the government reopen the investigation.
We want these bulk carriers looked at. We want them surveyed properly. We want the ones that are unseaworthy taken out of commission and scrapped. We want men to go away to sea, knowing that the ship underneath them is safe, not worrying whether they come home again or not.
In the face of overwhelming public interest, the British government agrees to fund a full-scale expedition. And this time, they bring in the heavy guns.
They brought in Woods Hole, who was the most advanced oceanographic and deep-sea research group of their day, and perhaps to this day as well.
The Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, whose team discovered the Titanic, will now explore the Derbishyre, over 4,000 meters beneath the sea.
The Derbishyre survey was really the world's sort of first very high-quality forensic investigation.
38-year-old robotics engineer Andy Bowen is in command of the world's most sophisticated submersible.
Our job was to actually go down and collect evidence for the possible scenarios that would explain why the ship was lost. For example, had the propeller fallen off? Had the rudder failed? Was there a fire in the engine room?
A total of 13 possible causes for the sinking are marked for investigation, including a possible catastrophic failure at frame 65.
Damn it, hooked again.
Andy Bowen maneuvers his ROV to image as much of the wreckage as possible.
Up and away.
He needs to give investigators enough detail to analyze the damage.
It was an incredible challenge to the extent that we're dangling these cameras at the end of literally a thread 3 miles down into debris field, something like a large collapsed skyscraper.
Wow, it's cooled. It's for the computers.
PhD student Alex Glykas joins Professor Douglas Faulkner to analyze the images.
You had a visibility up to maximum 10 meters. That's all you could see.
The debris is scattered over more than a kilometer of the sea floor.
All right, let's move in for a closer look. When I saw the name of the ship, preserved in an excellent condition at 4,200 meters, definitely that was a moment that I will never forget.
17 years after the tragic loss of the ship and her 44 passengers and crew, the answers may finally be within reach. Investigators guide a remote camera vehicle 4 kilometers below the surface of the Pacific Ocean. They need to know why the largest British ship ever lost at sea went down.
Really torn apart. Look at that.
The giant ship has been shattered into over 2,000 pieces of twisted metal and debris.
I was wondering why the ship is fragmented, why the ship is not in 2-3 pieces like the Titanic, for example.
Andy Bowen has examined many shipwrecks, but he's never seen anything like this before.
I think everyone was staggered by the fact that it covered such a large area. The bow and the stern of the ship were in 2 separate places, separated by a significant distance. And everything else in between, all of the ship's structure, was for the most part turned into what I would almost call confetti.
The twisted metal fragments are a telltale sign of a violent phenomenon that can tear a ship apart.
When the Derbishyre sank, because of its unique construction of a double hull, it actually did something which is to implode and then explode.
As the Derbishyre sank below the waves, increased water pressure drove her watertight double hulls inward. At that point, the trapped air became so highly compressed, it exploded.
It explodes back out in a shockwave. And that energy release was probably equivalent to many tons of TNT. And so the wreckage on the seafloor was just huge pieces of ship twisted by energy that just is almost impossible to imagine.
In other words, the explosions were the result of the catastrophe, not the cause. Investigators still have no idea what set off the disaster. The ROV has captured thousands of high-definition photographs. Investigators scrutinize them, searching for any sign of a fracture that occurred before the ship sank. In particular, around the known structural flaw at frame 65.
We definitely had to find evidence whether the rupturing of all the metal parts around bulkhead 65 was brittle or ductile. Ductile means that it took place slowly. Brittle means that the fragmentation took place rapidly.
But it's a dead end. Frame 65 shows unmistakable signs of the same explosive phenomenon.
It wasn't frame 65. This happened when she was already going down.
The cause they had hoped to prove, a weakness in her construction, is not the reason the Derbishyre sank.
We evidence that all these empty compartments aft of the bulkhead 65 had been exploded when the ship was sinking. So that means that there was no cracking on bulkhead 65.
If it wasn't frame 65, something else must have triggered the disaster.
We're losing her! We're gonna lose her! Abandon ship! Abandon ship! Abandon ship!
If the ship's structure didn't fail, investigators wonder, is her cargo responsible for her sinking?
Derbishyre was carrying this iron ore. The snowstorm of this fine material, it was scattered everywhere.
Ore carriers are very dangerous ships because they have such heavy, dense cargoes that as soon as the ship starts flooding and loses buoyancy, the ship goes straight to the bottom. An ore ship sinks literally like a stone.
On this voyage, the Derbishyre was loaded with 157,000 tons of iron ore, a cargo so heavy, only 7 of her 9 holds could be partially filled.
You need to ensure that your center of gravity and center of buoyancy, what's called the GM, is moderate. Otherwise, you get what's called a dead ship. It doesn't have that buoyancy and it whips from side to side.
Is it possible the crew made an error when they loaded the ship?
Are we good to go?
A dead ship is one that you start to get worried about.
Cheers, mate.
They review the records from the Derbishyre's port of departure, but there's no sign of any problem that would explain the disaster. Investigators are forced back to what they've always known. The sea conditions on the night the Derbishyre went down were unusually extreme.
One ship in the same typhoon reported seeing waves that were between 60 and 90 feet tall.
This is the Derbishyre. How are you enjoying the weather?
Hey, you stand on the bridge, and all you see ahead of you is just a wall of water. So you got to go over it or go through it.
Professor Faulkner proposes a theory, which at the time is still controversial. Perhaps the Derbishyre was overcome by a rogue wave.
And I think it's been happening since the dawn of time.
For centuries, mariners have told stories about vast waves that seem to come out of nowhere.
Rogue waves are often described as being a single solitary wave that's much taller than the rest of the seas, usually 2 to 3 times taller, often coming from a different direction from most of the other waves. The wave is breaking, it's unstable, and when it hits a ship, it can have incredible impact.
Nobody knows how they form. They literally form out of nowhere, and they will hit a ship.
Did a rogue wave send the Derbishyre and 44 people to the bottom of the sea?
It's terrible. It's terrible if you could see it, and just as terrible if you couldn't.
Investigators believe the hull of the Derbishyre was nearly intact when she sank. Was she overcome by a rogue wave? Or was it something else? They analyzed photographs of the wreckage, hoping to find out.
We're talking about 135,000 still images. So we had to put all these photographs together, like putting a puzzle back together.
Each image was taken individually and carefully placed in context to its neighbor so that you could get this large area view, which is impossible to get in any other way.
They literally put together an enormous mosaic of what the wreck looked like.
Most of the ship has been shattered, but the bow of the ship is different.
Amazing.
The bow was, for the most part, intact. And that indicated that the bow was generally flooded and full of water and therefore did not compress or explode under water pressure, which says a lot about the possibilities to why the ship sank.
If the bow was full of water, is this what caused the sinking?
That was a question to be answered. How the water came inside, and why there was water inside.
As investigators search for the source of the flooding, they find a troubling image.
We had close-up, high-definition photographs from the bow, and we saw the open hatch. The lid was lost. The butterfly screws were at a full extent, which meant that they could not have been locked. So there is a scenario forming there that hatch had been left open.
The open hatch they've discovered is the bosun's hatch, leading to a storage compartment below the forward deck.
Let's make sure the ship is secure, yeah?
Yes, sir.
Is it possible the wing nuts on the bosun's hatch were not properly secured by the crew?
Make sure you do it nice and tight.
If the hatch opened during the storm, tons of seawater could have entered the storage space below and loaded down the front of the ship.
The bow is lowering as the water is filling up these spaces. And there comes a point where the bow is not rising now like it should.
With the flooded bow sinking low in the water, waves would begin washing further and further up the deck, loading tons of seawater onto the enormous main cargo hatches.
Those hatches are strong, they're well made, but they're not designed for that type of loading. And by now we may be in the worst part of the weather, with waves maybe upwards of 40 feet. So each one of those falls down onto that number one hatch. Hundreds of tons falling down on the hatch.
A 12-meter wave can smash down with a force of 400 tons, far exceeding the design limit of the hatch covers. It would only be a matter of time before they gave way.
Look at that.
Once the first cargo hatch collapsed, the nearly empty hold would fill quickly, pulling the bow even deeper into oncoming waves.
The covers failed on hatch number 1. Hatch number 2 is empty. Hatch number 2 fills with water and begins pulling the ship down even further. By the time she reaches hatch number 3, and that is filling, the ship is well on her way to the bottom.
Investigators believe the evidence proves their theory. The disaster and the deaths of everyone on board could have been prevented if only the crew had properly secured the small bosun's hatch.
Families aren't going to like this.
As a courtesy, the families are told the news before it's released to the press.
When we delivered the presentation to the families, there was an astonishment in their face.
I'm sorry, but the pictures indicate the hatch wasn't secured.
The hatch wasn't secured, what does that mean, Mick?
It seems like bad seamanship.
Bad seamanship?
The bosun hatch wasn't secured.
No, that's wrong. No, you're wrong about that.
Evidence that pointed towards maybe there was a human error, I think really fueled the fire for these people. They said, no, these people were professional. There's just no way that kind of a crew would do something that would put themselves at peril.
You're wrong about this, and I'm going to bloody prove it.
I trusted the crew. They wouldn't put their lives in danger. You've spent all these years not being able to grieve properly.
Leave, thank you.
Fighting, campaigning, doing whatever you can, whatever you have to. And you come back and you say, bad seamanship.
Just look at the pictures.
The hatch wasn't left open. We'll prove it.
In the search for proof, the Derbishyre's former chief officer may already have the answer.
I knew for sure that the conclusions that had been drawn so far were wrong.
Former Chief Officer Nigel Malpass doesn't believe crew error caused the Derbishyre to sink. He was supposed to be aboard that final trip, but a last-minute crew change saved him.
Some people have said I'm the luckiest person alive, but in fact I should have been on the Derbishyre when she was lost. I'd been with most of that crew the trip before. I knew all the crew very well.
Malpass is certain the investigators have it wrong. He doesn't believe the crew would ever leave the forward hatch unsecured.
Anybody that knew the ship knew that you couldn't have drawn that conclusion. One of the things that convinced me when I saw the photograph of the boatswain's store with the bits of heaving line hanging off the docks, that she'd been well secured.
When Malpass was chief officer on the Derbishyre, he made sure the crew knew how to secure the bosun's hatch with a lashing, known as a cat's cradle.
We'd put a cat's cradle on that bosun's store. The whole essence of that being there was to stop those wing nuts opening. And I have no doubts that Derbishyre went through that procedure.
The testimony of Nigel Malpass, along with some strands of rope fastened to the bosun's hatch, effectively throw the investigators' findings into doubt. Something else must have caused the flooding in the bow that set off the disaster. For help, the High Court turns to MARIN, the Maritime Research Institute of the Netherlands. Here, they can simulate the behavior of all kinds of ships in nearly any sea condition.
In fact, we were the only facility in the world that could replicate the wave condition that happened during the accident. We could make any kind of waves, long crested waves, short crested waves. That means waves coming from different directions. And this was a very, very unique capability at that time.
The team at MARIN are tasked to recreate the conditions of Typhoon Orchid and test its impact on the Derbishyre. They need to know if something other than crew error could have set off the disaster.
There was very large expectation from the families. We really felt the pressure that we really had to perform.
We want the truth. If it is bad seamanship, fair enough. As long as they can prove without a shadow of a doubt someone made a mistake, we'll accept it.
For the Derbishyre test, the tank is programmed with detailed meteorological information about Typhoon Orchid. A precise 4.5-meter replica is loaded with sensors to track the stresses the typhoon put on the ship and its forward hatches.
It's a scale model, but the geometry must be very, very accurate. We also modeled the propulsion train because the speed of the ship was of importance. The loads would be different if the ship was sailing at 0 knots or 2 knots, 4 knots.
One of the key ideas is to have an unbiased impression of the behavior of the ship in storm condition. In our basin, the models have everything that is relevant for the behavior and safety of a normal ship.
Hour after hour, the Derbishyre replica is driven through the very worst of Typhoon Orchid. Even with huge waves breaking over her bow, sensors detect no sign of failure from the forward hatches.
During the model test, we saw, of course, a lot of dramatic events like wave coming on the forward deck and breaking on the hatch cover. But the ship should not have sunk with these type of conditions. So it had to be something else.
If neither the cargo hatches nor the bosun's hatch failed at this point in the storm, where did the seawater that filled up the bow come from?
That was the big question. What was the opening in the ship that made it possible to lower the bow of the vessel in a such way that you would expose the forward part of the ship to the waves?
Weeks of tests turn up few clues, until the team turns to a theory so unlikely, it hardly seemed worth considering. Air vents on the forward deck lead down to open storage areas below. Wreckage photos reveal the caps that keep water out of the vents were damaged by the heavy seas. Did the damaged air vents let in enough seawater to cause flooding in the bow?
People realized that forepeak had been flooded, but many people found it hard to believe that that would have an influence on the loads that were experienced by the hatch cover.
But we thought, well, who knows? Who knows the rate of water coming in? Just let's test it and measure it.
While the bulk carrier industry waits for answers, with thousands of seafarers' lives at risk, the final test begins. 2 decades of debate over what caused the Derbishyre tragedy and the deaths of 44 people may finally be close to an answer. Investigators are about to test an unconventional theory. Were leaky air vents on the deck enough to trigger the disaster?
We proposed to mimic those open holes on the model, but the question was, are these openings big enough? Can we prove that the time frame over which the ship was exposed, that's long enough that it fills completely?
The air vents are so small, they only let in a trickle of water compared to the size of a ship. But Typhoon Orchid lasted more than 2 days, long enough for that trickle to become a flood.
We were able to show that the ingress rate was more than enough to explain that the entire forepeak was full of water.
Once flooded, the bow sinks deeper into oncoming waves, and the large cargo hatches are hammered with more and more water.
Within 5 to 6 hours, you would get waves that would create loading in excess of what is admissible for hatch cover. It was a big surprise for everybody to realize that so tiny little holes could produce this chain of event, and this was really the breakthrough.
The discovery is the missing link investigators needed. They now know what caused the 20-year-old tragedy. It began when the Derbishyre's captain and crew were enduring their second day of Typhoon Orchid.
20 degrees starboard. 20 degrees to starboard, Captain. Easy does it.
They're unaware of the danger unfolding under the forward deck.
The ventilator caps are gone. There's water now filling into the bosun's locker and into the lower stores. And from the bridge, you can't see this. You'd be very lucky if you can see it all. Maybe we have a 4-mast light on. You may be able to just make it out, but you can't see that it's slowing in its rise and its fall. It's not as high now.
The Derbishyre has endured more than 2 days of pounding seas.
Now we have waves spilling over the bow and making it down as far as the number 1 hatch.
We're gonna feel this one.
One after the other, the 9 enormous cargo hatches give way.
We're losing her! We're gonna lose her!
You wouldn't quite believe what you're seeing. And while you're thinking that, the ship's going down.
Abandon ship! Abandon ship!
Number 2 would have gone.
What's going on?
Followed by number 3. Number 4, number 5, number 6.
Abandon ship!
Number 7, number 8, and number 9, in rapid sequence.
By that time, it's too late.
The fate of everyone on board is sealed.
The ship sank so quickly that no one was able to send a message.
The investigation estimated within the span of a few moments.
On November 8, 2000, the High Court inquiry in London concludes that the Derbishyre sank due to waves destroying air pipes in the bow, triggering uncontrollable flooding.
The one thing that we've lived with now for over 12 months is the fact the assessors blame the crew for the loss of the ship, and today they're being completely exonerated.
The court delivers new safety recommendations for bulk carriers. They include a requirement to install devices to control flooding in the forward section, and the construction of significantly stronger hatch covers.
The cover design, almost doubled in strength, was adopted by the international community. And hatch covers and bulk carriers around the world are much safer because of the Derbishyre.
In 2004, Paul Lambert and the Derbishyre Family Association's efforts to improve safety are recognized when they're awarded the Marine Society's Thomas Gray Silver Medal.
And I think that's one of the more remarkable stories about this, is their continued persistence to get to the bottom of what happened.
I believe that ship tried to keep them seafarers safe. And in the end, it was just too much. She was just too tired. She'd lost her trim, her head was constantly on the water, and you were just waiting for that hatch breaking wave. And when it come, she just couldn't do anymore.
Coast Guard, we are positively in bad shape.
A cargo ship capsizes in a winter storm, throwing the crew into freezing waters.
It was absolutely undescribably cold.
You have about 1 hour until you become unconscious from hypothermia.
The ship had sailed through raging seas many times before. Why did this voyage end in disaster?
The weather shouldn't have been a problem, so what happened?
Investigators now have a deadly mystery to solve. What they discover is shocking.
Unbelievable. The Marine Electric was a tragedy that never should have happened.
It's a stormy winter day off the coast of Virginia.
Yeah, copy that. We're on our way.
Captain Philip Coral of the bulk carrier Marine Electric is on what should have been a short run up the coast. But he's just received word a nearby ship is in trouble.
Fishing vessel Theodora is in distress. We gotta go lend a hand.
Roger, Captain.
Gene Kelly was on board as the Marine Electric's third mate.
So they called us and asked if we could turn and go stand by the Theodora. And if they did sink, then you'd go into some type of a rescue attempt. There is the law of the ocean, you don't leave anybody in peril.
The distress call finds the Marine Electric partway through a routine run, carrying nearly 25,000 tons of coal from Norfolk, Virginia, up the Atlantic coast to Somerset, Massachusetts. The 40-year-old vessel is no stranger to bad weather. It was built as a tanker during World War II. After the war, it was converted to carry cargo for commercial shipping.
The Marine Electric had been through heavy seas before. They were confident that she was able to navigate through a tough storm.
The ship's crew is also very experienced. The Marine Electric's captain is a veteran mariner with 4 decades at sea. Chief officer is Bob Cusick. He noticed the position of the Theodora when Marine Electric sailed past.
Now, where were they when you saw them?
They were somewhere around here.
Bob Cusick, friendliest guy you could imagine working for. Made life easy, explained everything, was not overbearing.
The sea was in his blood. He loved the sea from the time he was a little boy. He sailed from the time he was 15 to the time he was 64 or 65.
Based on Cusick's coordinates, Captain Coral will have to turn the ship a full 180 degrees through waves 6 meters high.
Prepare to alter course. Standing by.
Turning means putting the ship temporarily broadside to the enormous ocean waves. If they don't time it perfectly, it could capsize the ship.
Even if it imperils you, it doesn't matter. You have to do whatever it takes to help a fellow mariner.
Now, turn left, standing on 220.
Roger, Captain, turning to 220.
As the ship turns, it cuts across the oncoming waves and shakes violently from side to side. Michael Carr served in the U.S. Merchant Marine. He knows what the crew was facing.
It's like turning around on a freeway with everything coming right at you. It was very dangerous.
Almost there.
When she actually turned, the entire ship shudders. And then the ship comes back down and it just displaces tons and tons and tons of water at one time.
Just like turning a rowboat, Captain.
Coral times the turn perfectly.
It was neatly done. He seemed really to know what he was doing. He handled the ship well and really put the minds of the officers and crew at ease. They knew that Coral was a pro.
Any sign of the fishing vessel Theodora?
I have a light bearing 2 points on the starboard bow.
2 points off the starboard bow.
They quickly spot the vessel in distress.
Got it.
The 20-meter fishing boat is struggling in the 6-meter seas. It's taking on water, and the pumps that normally remove it aren't working.
Coast Guard, this is Marine Electric. We are at position 37 degrees, 50.1 minutes north. 74 degrees, 53.6 minutes west.
Roger, we copy that. On our way.
Coral reports the ship's position to the Coast Guard and does what he can to help.
Now let's see if we can make a wall.
The massive Marine Electric positions itself so it can shield the fishing boat from the worst of the waves until Coast Guard rescuers arrive.
It was like the Theodora having a wall of steel between her and the rows of swells that were coming in and threatening her.
We get pounded pretty good. We were rolling pretty good, taking a lot of spray over the deck. But it wasn't long before the Coast Guard helicopter was there, dropped the dewatering pumps on, and they got the dewatering pumps up and running.
The Marine Electric protects the Theodora for nearly an hour while it pumps out. With Theodora finally out of danger, the Coast Guard clears the Marine Electric to continue on course for Massachusetts. But the storm is getting worse. The ship is now struggling to make any headway.
You're talking about a fierce nor'easter here. Every time you have a wave, a ship really porpoises through it, really. And the bow may actually be submerged for a little bit in really rough weather.
Ships like the Marine Electric were designed to cut through ocean waves, which wash over the deck and roll off the sides. But the storm has slowed their progress to a crawl.
I am heaving 2. Slow ahead on the engine.
Heaving 2, slow ahead on the engine.
We're gonna have to ride this out.
The captain slows the ship and heaves to, a position that simply holds it in place at the safest angle to the waves. With the storm jeopardizing the ship, the captain catches what sleep he can on the bridge.
He wanted to be woken every 15 minutes and appraised of the situation. Did he have a premonition? I don't know.
Can't see a damn thing.
Oh, stop.
The wind was really howling, really howling. She had already cranked up to at least 40, 45 miles an hour. It was really bad. And I went out just to feel the magnitude of the weather. No other reason. I didn't have ships on the radar that I was looking for. I wasn't looking to make a weather report. I just wanted to feel the magnitude of the weather. Quickly, I realized there was no place to stand out there.
Hours pass as the Marine Electric endures lashing rain and heavy seas. With 6-meter waves tossing the ship, there's little sleep for anyone on board.
I remember just staying in the bunk and laying there and maybe dozing here and there for 5 or 10 minutes. It was not a comfortable night.
Then, third mate Gene Kelly is startled awake.
Somewhere around 1 o'clock that I got a knock on my door.
Rise and shine! Captain wants all deck officers on the bridge!
When my feet hit the deck, I could tell the attitude of the ship had changed.
Kelly's instinct is right.
Coast Guard, this is Marine Electric. I am going down by the head.
Something is very wrong on the Marine Electric. The bow is no longer rising out of the waves.
The forward part of the ship was underwater. The ocean was no longer rising up and boarding the ship and then shipping off the other side. Looking out on this, I knew that this ship was in trouble.
"30 miles off the coast of Virginia, the bulk carrier Marine Electric is struggling to stay afloat in a savage winter storm.
The ship was now having water board all the way back down the deck. It was almost like a waterfall would look. Water just boiling and boiling and boiling.
Get your rope down, come on, let's get it undone! 1, 2, come on, 3.
The waters of the Atlantic Ocean in February are a frigid 4 degrees Celsius. Everyone hopes they won't actually be forced to abandon ship.
Give it, long! Right, you and me, let's go, we gotta check the other side!
Abandoning ship is the last resort. It basically says we cannot no longer solve the problems in front of us and we need to get off the vessel, which is sometimes even a worse set of circumstances. The water is freezing cold. It's the middle of winter. The wind's howling. I mean, these are huge seas as big as houses. So lifeboats or life rafts are not an improvement over staying on the ship.
Captain Coral has a final, desperate plan to avoid sinking.
Prepare to alter course. I'm gonna try to run her aground. Preparing to alter course.
He's less than 50 kilometers from the coast. If he can run the Marine Electric aground, it might keep the ship and its crew above water long enough to be rescued by the Coast Guard.
When I heard that he had turned northwest and was trying to run the ship aground, I thought, that's a pretty drastic move.
They turn for land, but the bow is now completely underwater.
The water was coming back right to the base of the house and just exploding into white water. Hatches were completely covered with ocean water.
And there's another problem.
Coast Guard, this is Marine Electric. I am listing at 8 degrees now.
The water entering the ship is now making it list dramatically. It's now in serious danger of capsizing altogether. The captain calls for rescue.
Coast Guard, you are positively in bad shape.
Roger, we copy that. Estimate to your position, 2 hours.
We don't have 2 hours.
Coast Guard, Marine Electric. I think I'm gonna lose my ship here.
It was at that point that reality really hit home. When Phil said, I think I'm gonna lose my ship. He was matter of fact, he wasn't screeching into the microphone, I'm losing my ship. It was just a statement.
It just had to have been incredibly tough, but he just obviously saw at one point, we're not gonna survive this. And so you have no choice at that point.
Okay, guys, time to go. Sound the alarm. Abandon ship right now. Go! We are abandoning ship right now!
The crew scrambles on deck.
You're sinking. The amount of time you have to take action is very short. You start to grasp the reality that this Mother Nature will wipe you out without even a second thought.
They're trying to board the lifeboat, but the list is swinging it away from the deck.
It looked like it could have been the Grand Canyon. There was no way people were going to jump from the ship into that lifeboat.
Third mate Gene Kelly knows the ship could turn over at any second. taking the lifeboat along with it.
Kelly saw a stack of life rings. And he threw them out into the water, almost as if he were throwing discus.
I had a daughter at home, I had a wife, I had 2 dogs, and I had a good life, and I was not gonna get swallowed up by the ocean.
Moments later, the massive ship begins turning over.
I remember Paul Dewey was reaching over to haul the lifeboat closer to the side of the ship. And it was at that point that I saw Paul reach and tumble over the side. He was the first person that I saw go in the water. And as the ship was rolling, I could hear people screaming and yelling. And I could see the smokestack starting to come down on top of me. I don't know where it came out of. A primeval scream, and it was from my mother. It was, "Ma!"
Kelly is thrown into the freezing water, wearing only a life jacket and the clothes on his back, as the Marine Electric completes its terrifying roll.
It was absolutely undescribably cold. Somebody put you in a vise and turned it as tight as you could. I couldn't catch a breath.
The rest of the crew is scattered around him.
I'm treading water in my life jacket. When I reached the crest of a wave, I could see the strobe lights on all the life jackets. And then you'd be down in the trough of the waves, and you might only see 1 or 2 flashes.
The churning ocean is frigid. Unless help arrives soon, none of them will survive.
You have 1 minute to get your breathing under control. You have about 10 minutes of meaningful movement and 1 hour until you might become unconscious from hypothermia.
Drifting alone in the dark, Kelly gets lucky.
I just bumped into something, and it turned out to be 5 other guys holding onto a life ring.
Kelly grabs on, and together they fight for their lives against the deadly effects of the freezing ocean.
The water was excruciatingly cold. The other guys on the life ring, they kept falling off to sleep. I know Richie Roberts was a very quiet death. Because he fell asleep, and I said, "Richie, you all right? Richie, Richie." And he didn't respond. In itself, hypothermia is a very violent internal death. Externally, it looked very peaceful. It was very inviting to go to sleep and just maybe wake up later.
Barely conscious after more than an hour in the water, Kelly hears something overhead. A Coast Guard rescue helicopter.
It looked like the Angel of Mercy come over. I was able to reach out and grab the flashlight, and I started to maneuver it up into the sky. Hopefully somebody would see it at that point.
The helicopter is equipped with a basket to hoist survivors to safety, but it's meant to extract them from lifeboats. Kelly and almost all of the rest of the crew are in the water. The intense cold has left them unable to grab on and pull themselves into it. A Navy helicopter arrives next, and rescue swimmer James McCann plunges in. He's trained to pull survivors from the water.
I swim to the person, grab them by the back of their jacket, don't even check to see if they're alive or dead, and swim over to the basket.
McCann is the sole rescue swimmer on the scene. Only he can pull men directly from the water.
They were pretty much face down in the water. Some of them were head up in the water with no movement whatsoever. They just kind of had the arms limped out here, and the vest was basically holding them up.
McCann braves the deadly seas for nearly an hour, retrieving as many crewmen as he can.
I knew I was going to hypothermia, but I didn't want to quit. Up in the helicopter, the crew chief saw me shaking, he called it. He pulled me in.
In the end, only 3 men survived the freezing waters: able seaman Paul Dewey, chief mate Bob Cusick, and third mate Gene Kelly.
Why me? Why was it me that made it? Who knows? Who knows? But, yeah, my ticket wasn't over for the ride. That's what I keep telling people. Who knows?
The capsizing of the Marine Electric has left 31 men dead. But what caused it remains a mystery. The search for answers will become the most important maritime inquiry in American history.
Everything changed because of the Marine Electric.
Seven hours after it capsized, the Marine Electric finally disappears into the Atlantic. Meanwhile, news of the tragedy has already spread.
When I found out about the Marine Electric, I was in my apartment at school in Amherst, the University of Massachusetts.
Carol Cusick is the daughter of the ship's chief mate, Bob Cusick.
There were 3 or 4 feet of snow fell that night. And so our phone lines were down. There was a knock on the door, and my friend opened it, and there was a state policeman there. And he said, "Carol, your father's one of the survivors." And I said, "Survivors of what?" And he said, "Your father's ship sank." And I just sort of collapsed into my friend's arms and started sobbing. It was a shock.
31 members of the Marine Electric's crew of 34 are dead, including Captain Philip Coral.
To the maritime community, the shock of the loss of the men, many of whom died of hypothermia in those very cold seas, it was a huge thing.
Why did the Marine Electric, a ship that had sailed through rough seas for nearly 40 years, capsize and sink to the bottom of the Atlantic?
Look here. Let's see where we are on this.
In Portsmouth, Virginia, the U.S. Coast Guard immediately convenes a Marine board to investigate the disaster. Captain Peter Lauritsen is in charge.
The Coast Guard has the authority to investigate marine casualties. The Coast Guard office sent investigators out immediately, and so they were gathering information, and they were feeding it to us.
Hey, nice to see you again. Hey, welcome aboard.
Because of the serious nature of the accident, the National Transportation Safety Board joins the inquiry.
If there's more than 6 deaths, they automatically had a responsibility to investigate also.
Okay, let's talk about the areas of interest.
The weather seems like an obvious factor, but Lauritsen suspects it won't completely explain the disaster.
The weather shouldn't have been a problem with a vessel that was operating normally. So, what happened?
The inquiry will consider everything from the ship's structural integrity to human error. So Lauritsen needs to see every scrap of information he can get.
We're gonna need the survey, the records, and manifest. Okay. Got it. Everything that you got, okay?
Divers survey the wreck and discover the hull in several large pieces on the seafloor, presenting Lauritsen his first possible cause: its cargo of nearly 25,000 tons of coal. The heavy cargoes that bulk carriers contain have to be loaded in just the right way, or it can put a huge strain on the ship's structure and even break it in half.
If you load the holds in the wrong sequence, if you load too much in one hold and not enough in another hold, you can have situations where the ship will literally break apart.
Lauritsen wonders if the crew made a deadly loading error before they ever left port.
All good?
As always.
Yeah.
The sequence is important so you don't overstress the vessel.
All right.
Okay, thanks, Bob.
Okay, so let's take a look at the loading sequence here, and let's take a look at the weights.
Lauritsen checks the crew's loading records, but there's no sign they made any mistakes.
Number 2.
The cargo wasn't too heavy, and the holds were loaded in the correct order to avoid straining the ship.
That's the sequence it was loaded.
It was a normal loading process, so we know now the vessel was not overstressed beyond the capability of the ship to handle it.
Meanwhile, the ship's owner, Marine Transport Lines, goes public with its theory about what went wrong.
In all accidents, you're going to get all sorts of theories. You're going to have all sorts of interests protecting their own interests.
Fishing vessel Theodora is in distress. We gotta go lend a hand. Where were they when you saw them?
Around here.
The company suspects the ship strayed into shallow water and damaged the hull when they diverted to help the Theodora.
The theory that the company came up with is that when we went to the Theodora, we got ourselves into too shallow a water and we pounded the bottom.
Okay, let's hear what we got.
The Coast Guard listens to recordings of the captain's radio calls, relaying the Marine Electric's position during the Theodora rescue to verify if the theory is true. They listen carefully as the captain reports his position.
Coast Guard, this is Marine Electric. We are at position
37 degrees, 50.1 minutes north. 74 degrees.
53.6 minutes west.
And then check that position on the navigation chart.
53.6 minutes west.
West.
There's no sign the captain steered the ship into trouble.
They were in good water.
The survivors tell the same story. They didn't hear or feel anything indicating they had run aground.
Take a hammer and hit the roof of your house, and does a person in the cellar hear it? Sure they do. Had we heard that noise, we would have been searching for any breaches in the hull, flooding, etc.
They had solid witnesses that they had their positions marked, they knew where they were, and they didn't hit bottom.
Lauridsen and his team will have to find another theory to explain why the Marine Electric went down, taking 31 men along with it. The inquiry into the sinking of the Marine Electric has little physical evidence to work with. The ship is at the bottom of the Atlantic. But they do have the captain's radio calls to the Coast Guard. They're hoping the tapes might offer a clue to what caused the disaster.
Coast Guard, this is Marine Electric. I am listing at 8 degrees now.
It's clear the ship lost stability fast and was on the verge of sinking by the time the captain gave the order to abandon ship.
He seemed to recognize, I would say at the correct time, we got to get off this ship, we got to abandon ship. He made the right decision.
I'm going down by the head. I seem to be taking on water forward.
Stop it. Play that back.
I'm going down by the head.
I seem to be taking on water forward.
Flooding down by the bow.
The captain told the Coast Guard he thought he had flooding in the bow.
Rise and shine! Captain wants all deck officers on the bridge!
If he was right, it would explain the ship sloping toward the bow the way Third Mate Gene Kelly remembers.
I'd been on enough ships that my senses told me that there was something different. I could feel the bow was down a bit, so it was noticeable.
But what caused the flooding in the first place? At the Marine Board of Investigation hearing, the ship's owners present another shocking explanation. Bulk carriers like the Marine Electric have massive cargo hatches. In their testimony, the company says the crew failed to secure a hatch in the forward part of the ship.
Hatches are supposed to be watertight. There's a big difference between watertight versus weathertight. Watertight is water under pressure. Weathertight is just the rain.
It's Seamanship 101. If a hatch isn't fastened watertight, the cargo compartment could flood in heavy seas. It might account for the low bow the captain reported before the Marine Electric sank. But one of the survivors, Chief Mate Bob Cusick, was in charge of the loading process, and he knows the crew did nothing wrong. Cusick prepares to testify before the inquiry. He has his own theory about why the Marine Electric went down, and he has no intention of letting his fellow mariners take the blame.
There was a great deal of mutual respect. They were a team. A lot of them had been on this ship for a long time, and he always said they were like a band of brothers.
But Cusick faces an uphill battle.
A maritime board of inquiry, in the old days, they certainly didn't have smiles on their faces. It wasn't a friendly conversation.
The chief mate recounts his harrowing story of survival after falling from the deck into the sea along with the crew.
He could see the hull of the ship. He actually swam past his cabin window, which was still lit, but now it was underwater, and he peered into his cabin window. And then came up, broke the surface, looked around, and saw nothing.
Court sketches capture his story.
I kept swimming. I could hear cries. All sorts of groans and cries. And then the miraculous part about it, as you've heard, is my running across the lifeboat. And then I waited and prayed for the daylight to come. All the time I kept yelling out, lifeboat here, come here, lifeboat here. Maybe that someone was there that could come over and I could drag them in.
It's an emotional account, but it's only the beginning. Cusick goes on to present a compelling new explanation for the sinking of the Marine Electric.
He was an honest man, he was an honorable man, and there's no way that he was going to betray the memories of his shipmates by lying about that ship.
Cusick confirms the shipping company's charge that the massive hatches weren't secure, but says the company, not the crew, is to blame.
Not all the hatches were 100% secured because some of them just were not mechanically usable.
For years, Cusick has kept meticulous records of the ship's slow deterioration and presents them to the inquiry.
My father knew that ship inside and out, and he wasn't afraid to tell the truth.
Bob knew the ills of the ship. He had lists of shipyard jobs that were not done because of budgetary cuts. The hatches on that ship were old, warped, and cracked, didn't fit properly, were supposed to have been repaired in the last shipyard period, but they were always in bad shape. And Bob had drawings of hatches that needed to be repaired. He had that in his files at home.
His testimony drives the inquiry to dig deep into the ship's maintenance history, where they will find one of the shipping industry's darkest secrets.
The Marine Electric was a tragedy that never should have happened.
Unbelievable. Thank you.
The Marine Board pores over box after box of the Marine Electric's repair records, searching for evidence to back up Chief Mate Bob Cusick's claims of negligence by the ship's owners.
Cusick's records, he gave us several leads.
You're going to go back to the company and say, I want all your invoices for all the repairs you've done. We want to see everything you did or did not approve. You're going to match up invoices to what was said by witnesses, by what maybe you said in past shipyards. You're going to go back to past shipyards, maybe even 2-3 years to find out, especially on Marine Electric. I'd go back at least 3 years.
The inquiry catches a lucky break. One of the ship's hatch covers was replaced just 3 months before the disaster. They track down the discarded hatch in a construction yard and analyze its condition. What they find is alarming.
It was paper thin to 75% wastage, and the supporting structure was just as deteriorated.
The company had waited until it was nearly crumbling to replace it. Cusick had testified that the company ordered repairs to the hatches and deck be done using second-rate materials, including an epoxy known as Red Hand, which is meant to be a temporary fix. It's not watertight long-term, and not nearly as strong as steel. The worn-out hatch cover backs up his claim.
The red hand was used to fill cracks, and the ship had hundreds of them on the deck, on the sides of the hatches, on the hatch cover handles themselves. They were everywhere.
If you walked on the hatch covers, you stood a really good chance of falling through. These hatch covers are supposed to be built to keep tons of seawater out. And there were holes in the deck that were circled so that people didn't trip over them.
It always comes back to money, doesn't it? So we'll weld a plate over that hole, and it'll keep us going. We'll get the repairs later, next time we're in dry dock.
Most revealing in the company records is the note of another critically degraded surface, the dry cargo hatch. It's located at the bow, which was often submerged as the ship cut through the high waves.
Coast Guard, this is Marine Electric. I seem to be taking on water forward.
Makes sense, down by the bow.
It's the missing piece of the puzzle. Investigators now have a clear picture of the sequence of events that led to the tragedy.
Can't see a damn thing.
The serious flooding started somewhere in that early evening watch.
Waves breaking over the bow poured through the compromised dry cargo hatch and deck plating.
And so spaces that shouldn't have had water filled with water.
The massive weight of water collecting in the bow then began to drag it down, exposing the enormous hatch covers behind to the raging ocean.
The hatch covers started being hit by thousands of tons of water.
The waves poured through the degraded hatch covers and began collecting inside the hatches.
Coast Guard, I'm going down by the head.
The hatches were being completely covered by water.
The rapidly flooding ship became more and more unstable and started listing to one side.
Once that happened, the vessel was lost.
Abandon ship right now! Go! You're abandoning ship right now!
The inquiry now knows the Marine Electric was a ticking time bomb of shoddy repairs. Yet somehow it passed inspections in February 1981 and June 1982, just 7 months before the disaster.
"30 minutes for an inspection? Unbelievable."
Records from the Coast Guard and the American Bureau of Shipping reveal shocking signs of rushed inspections and skipped steps.
The American Bureau of Shipping is the private agency that is supposed to survey the hull and show that that's safe.
It should have almost taken days. Every hatch cover, every watertight opening, every weathertight opening should have been surveyed.
There was one crack in the deck. They had spray painted a circle around it, and then Coast Guard inspectors stepped over it without making any comment.
The Marine Board finds both the American Bureau of Shipping and the Coast Guard responsible for improper inspections and failing to acknowledge apparent damage on board the Marine Electric. Incredibly, during the 40-year-old ship's last inspection, the clearly deteriorated hatch covers weren't even tested to see if they could keep out the rain, a procedure typically performed with a fire hose.
For a ship this old and the conditions of the hatches, to not conduct a hose test when it's in the yard, the best I can say is negligent at best.
Unbelievable.
Investigators discover that inspectors from both agencies missed blatant evidence of poor maintenance.
It's just amazing that a ship this age, this condition, did not get the scrutiny from the regulatory agencies that it should have gotten.
One of the problems with any sort of regulation is it gets very easy to have your standards slowly drop. The American Bureau of Shipping and the Coast Guard simply got sloppy.
But with dozens of other World War II-era bulk carriers still in service, the Coast Guard will need to move fast to prevent a similar tragedy before it happens again.
Okay.
The inquiry into the Marine Electric tragedy not only investigates why the ship capsized, but also asks why the Coast Guard was unable to save more than 3 of the 34 men who went into the water. A Coast Guard helicopter was first on the scene, but tragically, the chopper and crew weren't equipped for the task.
So a Coast Guard crew at this time has a big helicopter that can land on water if the seas are flat enough, and a rescue basket. Those are their tools to get people from in trouble to out of trouble.
But during the Marine Electric disaster, the raging seas made landing impossible, and the frigid water had rendered the survivors helpless.
During the Marine Electric case, the basket went down to people who couldn't climb into it, and now they're just guys in a helicopter turning fuel into noise and watching people not make it.
The Coast Guard hovered helplessly for 45 minutes until a Navy helicopter arrived with a rescue swimmer.
The Navy had to have rescue swimmers to pick up downed aviators, and here they were being used on professional mariners, and it worked. So the Congress directed that the Coast Guard stand up a rescue swimmer program so people could enter the water and assist victims who couldn't help themselves.
In 1984, the year following the tragedy, the Coast Guard established its rescue swimmer school based in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Today, it's the standard by which all other maritime rescue training programs are measured. The facility can create realistic storm conditions, complete with lightning and high waves, to test a trainee's ability to remain calm and focused in rescue situations. Petty Officer John DeSalle is one of the school's instructors.
This is a fantastic training facility. We're trying to have the situational awareness, the attention to detail to go out there and deploy alone, because once you leave that helicopter, it's up to you and you only to help.
We'll sound off each lap. You understand?
The program is physically and mentally grueling. Of the approximately 75 candidates who sign up each year, on average, less than 50% will graduate.
Now they look at these kids coming out of here as the Swiss Army knife. They've gone through twice the physical training I went through. They are a honed professional athlete.
As of 2017, the Coast Guard estimates its rescue swimmers have saved more than 21,000 lives.
It's that motto, so others may live, you know? It's not so I can go home too. It's so others may live. I'm gonna go down there and I'm bringing some people home, or I'm gonna die trying.
The Coast Guard's final report on the Marine Electric disaster brings historic changes to the shipping industry as well. Beginning in 1984, ships are now required to provide an immersion suit for each merchant marine sailing in cold waters. Wearing one can delay the onset of hypothermia by up to 6 hours.
I taught ocean survival, and when we would get to the point in the course where we're going to learn how to use immersion suits, I would always start out by going, okay, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a story about the Marine Electric and all these mariners that died, and the fact that, I was getting emotional, that you guys are lucky because you have immersion suits now, because these guys died and they didn't have them.
The Marine Board's recommendations also lead to stricter inspection regulations and greater oversight by the Coast Guard and the American Bureau of Shipping.
The Marine Electric was an old bulk carrier that they'd let get away from themselves in terms of maintaining, particularly the hatch covers and the main deck.
There was lip service given to safety. There were caps that said Marine Transport Line safety first. But the culture was not like that. The culture was to ignore the holes in the hatches, ignore the holes in the hull. Just one more run, and we're going to have a new ship. But then there was always one more run.
The company failed, the Coast Guard failed, ABS failed, you know, all this stuff was happening, and people had responsibility. And CUSIC gave us the key to it.
Through that targeting, they were able to force more than 90 old World War II type ships out of service.
For Bob Cusick, who died in 2013, the sweeping changes brought at least some relief from his painful memories of the disaster.
I've often thought about how many lives my father helped to save. And I think knowing that so many of these ships were taken off the seas because of his testimony, I think that did help my father get over some of his survivor's guilt.
The legacy of the Marine Electric was one of the greatest reform efforts in American maritime history.
We honor the 31 that were lost. We couldn't do anything about the loss of the vessel, but we made sure that their loss was a lesson learned.
In the North Atlantic, a massive bulk carrier suddenly snaps in two.
This happened very, very quickly, literally at the speed of sound.
25 men are in a fight for their lives.
It was so scary. The ship was definitely going to sink.
Why did we lose so many people? Why in the first place would this ship even break in two?
The search for answers will lead to the bottom of the ocean.
Well, look at that.
And a string of mysterious sinkings around the world.
All of these are bulk carriers.
No one knows what happened to those vessels.
That's insane.
They just disappeared.
Winter in the North Atlantic, and the 180-meter bulk carrier Flare is heading west.
Bulk carriers are designed to do heavy lifting and heavy work. Throughout their lifetime, they carry very dense, heavy cargoes, and they trade all over the world.
Chief, increasing speed to 12 knots.
Aboard is the captain and 24 crew. They've just come out of a powerful winter storm, and another is on its way.
Hold course.
Holding course.
23-year-old Cyrus Ferrarin is at the helm. New to the ship, he signed on just a week before departure.
Ang position ko doon sa MV Flare.
My job on the Flare was the able-bodied seaman. I was in charge of the manual steering on the ship. I wanted to be a sailor because my uncle was a sailor. And when I was a kid, he was always coming home from his trips, happy and with lots of money. That's why I thought I'd like to do it too.
Masaya, maraming pera. Ganun, na-joke ako na magseaman ako.
The Flare is more than halfway on an approximate 6,000-kilometer voyage from Rotterdam to Montreal to pick up a cargo of grain. The bulk carrier is equipped with massive cranes that can fill its 7 holds with almost 38,000 cubic meters of cargo. Right now, the holds are empty. Below deck, 4th Engineer Romarlo Napa is busy helping with repairs to one of the ship's ballast tanks.
We were actually inside the topside tank. It took us almost a whole day to work on the issue with the welder.
Like Cyrus, Romarlo is also new to the ship. Weeks earlier, when they joined the crew, they were welcomed by a ship's veteran, Tito Noses.
He was really helpful from the moment we came on board.
I was still young, and he was there to teach me. He's just the kind of guy he was.
The Flare is heading for the Canadian shipping channel, the Cabot Strait. It's an area known for bad weather.
Chief, decreasing speed to 5 knots.
Captain Chris Hearn is a master mariner from Newfoundland. He knows how rough these seas can get.
The Cabot Strait is between 2 land masses that have weather patterns that are different. So this faster moving water on top of slower moving water, building all this energy, and whips the waves up very high.
The crew secures the lifeboats to keep them from being torn from the ship during the storm.
The waves were strong, and the wind was loud. You could really hear it.
Marinig mo talaga yung hangin. Blow ng hangin. Malakas.
Keep her on the starboard bow.
The ship is not loaded, and she's more exposed to the elements and to storms. That ship was slamming and pounding. You can feel that vibration because the energy has to travel along the length of the hull.
Ang barko, kitang-kita mo kung paano.
You could actually see the ship bending in the big waves.
Nasa ibabaw na ng alon.
The bending and twisting can be an unnerving experience, but Flair was built to handle this.
All ships are designed to flex, and particularly really long ships. She's flexing and moving all the time.
The waves are reaching 9 meters high, as tall as a 3-story building.
Kasabang talaga.
It was really loud when the waves splashed on the bridge.
Front ng bow part ng barko.
Good night, sir.
Good night.
At 2 a.m., Cyrus's shift is over. He heads below to try and get some rest, but in a storm like this, it won't be easy.
Hindi ka naman makatulog kasi
You couldn't sleep because of the waves and the weather.
rough weather.
I couldn't see it, but I could feel it shaking and slamming.
Slamming talaga yung ano niya.
It's overspeeding too much. Hold it.
In the engine room, where Marlowe and his assistant struggle to keep the ship's engine from burning out.
Wala na kaming ginawa araw-araw.
We had to constantly adjust the speed of the engines from low speed to high speed, because when the ship goes through the waves, the stern tends to rise up out of the water.
Siyempre, ang tendency ng barko, tataas ang puwet.
As the vessel is slamming up and down as it's moving through these waves, sometimes the propeller is partially exposed. And when they come out of the water, there's no resistance. That overspeed can damage your engine.
O yun lang ang ginawa namin. Doon kami nagtatago.
We couldn't take our eyes off the engines for a second. It was like that the whole shift.
Talagang wala kang alisan doon. 4 na oras yung duty mo, 12 to 4.
Suddenly, around 4:30 in the morning,
Malakas na pagbaon.
There was a loud bang. What happened? Did we hit something? Then the alarm went off.
Nag-ring na yung alarm.
Abandon ship! We're sinking!
Wait! I'm coming!
Put on your life jackets now!
Kumatok siya sa pintuan ko tapos sabi
Someone banged on my door and told me to put on my life jacket.
life jacket. Tapos
I put on 2 pairs of pants and 3 pairs of socks.
3 medyas. Nahirapan na nga ako umakyat sa taas kasi
I had a hard time with the stairs because the ship was tilting.
outside, it's freezing, and the crew is terrified. Most aren't even dressed for the cold.
Pero si Rimarlo,
I saw Rimarlo, and he was in his pajamas. No socks, just his pajamas and a t-shirt.
At saka t-shirt.
It's not just the cold they're worried about. It's the shock of what's right in front of them. The entire front half of the ship is gone.
Their ship is just broken in half. It's almost too impossible to believe.
Tapos yung iba ng
I could see my crewmates were terrified. Some were crying, others were praying.
Yung nagdasal sa akin, nagdasal ako.
Sobrang takot na tayo.
It was so scary because we all saw that the ship was definitely going to sink. The only thing we could do then was figure out how to survive.
Ang iisipin mo na lang doon kung paano ka makasurvive.
25 men are trapped on a broken ship that's going down fast. The question now, can any of them survive the icy ocean that awaits them? The massive 180-meter bulk carrier flare has broken in half. The ship's 25 crew are in a desperate fight for their lives. They're trapped on the stern, and it's sinking fast.
It was just chaos. Everyone was in a panic.
The captain was nowhere to be seen. We assumed he had already gone over the side. So we just went ahead on our own. We made for the lifeboat, but we couldn't get it to launch.
Parang na lifeboat, hindi na namin magawa.
They had put additional lashings on the lifeboat to try and prevent it from being lost during the storm, and they can't get the lashings to release. The crew are struggling with life and death.
We kept asking each other, what are we gonna do?
Unable to launch the lifeboats, all eyes turned to the ship's radio operator.
We asked him if he called the SOS.
They're stunned to hear no call has been sent.
At least if he'd called, there might be a possibility we'd be rescued.
Desperate, the radio operator races back to the bridge in a last-ditch effort to make the call.
The stern section is sinking, and it's listing, so the radio officer has to make his way up, holding on to the ladders and up the stairwells to try and get to the bridge. The fact that he managed to do it at all is amazing. At the MCTS, the traffic station in Stephenville, they received a very faint, incomplete mayday by VHF, very high frequency radio.
Canadian authorities launch a massive hunt for the flare. But with only partial coordinates, the search area is enormous.
Ships, fixed-wing aircraft, and helicopters over an area of 6,000 square nautical miles to try and find where the flare is or was, and where hopefully some survivors might be.
Just after the mayday, crew members are still clinging to the railings as the ship goes down.
Tito, me, and the other guys, we were all on one side of the ship. We were all together just hanging on to the rails. We were really scared. Then I saw Tito let go of the railing.
Moments later, the rest of the crew have no choice but to follow. They jump just as the stern goes under.
The physical shock of that kind of cold water is unbelievable. It completely takes your breath away.
Gasping for air, Cyrus sees an overturned lifeboat. It's his only hope.
The water was cold. It was really painful and hard to swim.
It was really cold. But what made me even more scared than that is we were off the ship. We were in the water. There was some rope on top of the lifeboat, and I grabbed onto it. The other guys were all hunched and curled up because of the cold.
Cyrus, Romarlo, and 2 others have made it to the lifeboat. But with temperatures below freezing, just how long can they last?
Hypothermia sets in. You start to lose the ability to use your fingers and be able to move your arms and legs.
2 other crewmen also make it to the lifeboat, the radio operator and Romarlo's engine room assistant. They try, but they can't hold on to the overturned hull.
The just didn't have enough strength to pull him up to the lifeboat. I told him, I'm really sorry. We have to go our own separate ways.
Kasi wala na rin akong lakas para sa iakyat ko naman dalawa kong kasama at tatlong kasama sa taas.
Drifting in the bitter cold, their chances seem hopeless. Then suddenly, they see the bow of a ship. It appears to be coming their way.
Oh, yung isa naming kasama na nagsabi na, may ano na.
One of us even said, we were rescued.
We all hugged each other, my companions and I, and said, we're alive. The rescuers are here. I couldn't believe it.
Then, as the vessel comes closer, they discover it's not a rescue ship. It's the flare's broken bow, still afloat.
The flare broke in such a way that the watertight bulkheads were still intact. So now we've got these empty spaces that are helping this bow section stay afloat. It must have been an incredibly eerie situation.
Nabuhayan kami ng loob lahat.
We were all so hopeful. But when we figured out that it was just the forward part of the ship, that's when our hope was lost.
Nawala na naman ang pag-asa.
Delta Victor, that is a negative on any contact. I repeat, negative on contact.
By sunrise, the search has yet to find any trace of the ship or possible survivors. Search and rescue technicians Tony Isaacs and Paul Jackman know it's a bad sign.
We know it's cold, and we're in the North Atlantic, and there's people out there that are going to need us. Whether they're in a life raft, in the water, or on a boat, it's going to be cold.
It was daylight, so we were kind of wondering why they haven't been found yet, because it's a fairly big asset on the water. So it was kind of troubling that nobody has seen anything yet.
After more than 5 hours in the frigid water, the men are fading fast.
I prayed to the Lord. I said, please, give me a chance to see my family again.
Then, on the horizon, the search team spots something.
Look! Target, 2 o'clock!
Incredibly, the flare's bow section is still floating. The wreckage is found, but can the search team locate any survivors before their time runs out? Nearly 6 hours after receiving an incomplete Mayday call, rescuers have spotted the flare's bow section adrift in the North Atlantic.
We saw the bow quite a ways away, because obviously it was quite large.
The waves were crashing around, and to me it was sort of kind of a little eerie. Out the right side of the aircraft, we could see the oil slick.
There's no sign of anyone on board, but experience tells them if there are survivors, they won't be far away.
We had a fairly defined debris line, so we just followed that down, flying in a very slow hover.
Moments later, we could see the overturned boat. 4 people barely clinging to it, and one of them just barely raising his hand.
We heard a helicopter, and we all started saying, we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it.
Sabi ko nga sa nila, buhay na tayo nandito na rescuer.
When I got to the lifeboat, they were all hanging on to ropes, and were very reluctant to let go of that rope.
Tony's belly to belly when they're hoisting up and coming through the door.
One by one, the survivors are lifted to safety.
It was basically, I gotcha, and we're gone. When I brought the final survivor up, and he's basically wearing like boxer shorts, I was amazed, because I actually thought that he's wearing pants or something. But no, That's what this guy's wearing. That's how tough he was. And that he managed to survive 6 hours in North Atlantic on the 16th of January, wearing almost nothing.
After 6 hours in the deadly cold, Cyrus, Romarlo, and 2 others are lucky to be alive. They're taken to the nearby island of St. Pierre for emergency medical attention.
The next thing I knew, we were being wheeled off the helicopter. There were ambulances there.
Mga rescuer, yun.
One of the rescuers gave me the patch from his uniform. I was very thankful to him.
Kaya nagpasalamat ako sa kanya na
it was my second life.
Pangalawang buhay ko.
While the crew receives medical attention, the search team scours the area for another day. But no other survivors are found. 21 men are dead. For the family of Tito Noces, the news comes as a terrible shock.
So very hard, but we need to be strong because I know you sacrifice a lot for our children. As a child, I asked, like, why are you crying? And then she told me that, your dad already passed away. I just knew that my dad died in an accident, but not knowing how it happened.
As the flare's bow continues to drift at sea, investigators with the Transportation Safety Board of Canada launch an investigation to find out what caused the ship to break apart and why so many crewmen died.
Okay, gentlemen, got some aerial footage of the incident here.
The first thoughts are, of course, to the crew. Your mind goes to what could have happened.
It was pretty remarkable when we heard the details of what had happened to the vessel. I guess it's surreal that you've got this half a ship sort of drifting along.
Why did we lose so many people? Why aren't there more survivors? Why in the first place would this ship even break in two?
Investigator Leo Donati has come to Newfoundland to join former Sea Captain Bill McConey, the investigator in charge.
Let's see what these guys can tell us.
They're hoping the survivors can tell them what caused the wreck.
Take us through what you saw on the ship that day.
You want to interview survivors as soon as possible because our memories aren't static. They can change over time.
We were in very high waters the whole time.
They find out the ship faced 2 weeks of nearly constant extreme winds and heavy seas.
We couldn't eat. We couldn't sleep.
The waves, they are very big.
Their testimony is backed by weather reports of waves as high as 16 meters, the height of a 5-story building.
The ship is bending like this.
You capture as much information as you can. Really trying to get a clear picture of all the facts, all the details. What did you see? What did you hear?
Was there any sort of sound omitted when this happened?
It's like a big boom!
During the night of the accident, they heard a really loud bang. Clearly, that's when the vessel split apart.
Survivors heard the same ear-splitting sound, but none of them saw what caused it.
How can a ship that big simply break in half?
That's what we're here to find out.
Investigators have a deadly mystery on their hands. They also have unusual evidence. Imagery of the flare's broken bow taken over a 4-day period before it eventually sank.
Unbelievable. You definitely need to take a closer look at this.
John Garstang is a mechanical engineer and expert in metal failure analysis. He believes the imagery may hold clues to why the massive ship snapped in half.
You can actually pull out a tremendous amount of information from imagery. Photographs and video are very valuable from an investigative point of view.
It's a really clean fracture.
As he examines the edge of the break, Garstang makes a surprising discovery.
It's almost like I had a knife and a scalpel and I cut quite precisely and it just came apart.
This type of break is known as a brittle fracture.
A brittle fracture is something like how glass breaks. When it breaks, it breaks, but it doesn't deform much, twist or bend. It breaks quickly.
The theory matches the survivors' accounts, but to investigators, it doesn't make sense.
It says here this is made with grade D steel.
Which means it's not supposed to snap.
Like many bulk carriers, Flair's deck and upper hull are constructed from fracture-resistant steel. It's made to be flexible, not brittle, so it can bend and twist to absorb the punishment of heavy seas.
This ship has got metal that should be behaving in a ductile manner, absorbing more energy. Something like if I had a piece of licorice and I pulled on it and bent, it would deform, narrow down before it breaks. So we're seeing things that are unexpected that we don't understand.
Doesn't make any sense.
Investigators find themselves with a deeper mystery to solve.
Keep it on the starboard bow.
Why did a ship designed to flex and bend fail when the crew needed it most? The investigation into the breakup of the flare is now focused on the ship's flexible steel structure that should have enabled it to ride out the storm.
How can this ductile material behave brittly? We're still trying to figure this out. There's something else going on.
Looking for answers, investigators examine the ship's history and how it was operated.
The flare was built in 1972. So at the time of the occurrence, it was 26 years old, which for a bulk carrier is probably about 8 years past his normal service life.
Pretty old for a bulk carrier.
Investigator Ken Potter is a marine safety analyst on the team.
Bulk carriers do lead a tough life, and some of the materials they're carrying can be very hard on the vessel. For example, iron ore comes on board in pellets that are often very hot, and they're discharged with big grab buckets that actually can damage the vessel itself. There can be tremendous forces imposed on the hull by heavy cargoes like that stress the ship, sometimes beyond its limits.
The flare has had a long and brutal service life.
Here's something.
What do you got?
It turns out that bulk carriers like Flare also have a deadly history. Over the previous 7 years, a total of 99 bulk carriers were lost, taking with them over 650 lives.
All of these are bulk carriers. That's insane.
The numbers are shocking.
On average, that's roughly one bulk carrier would be lost a month. They would occur so suddenly, sometimes there was no maydays.
The investigators consider a terrifying possibility. Other bulk carriers may also have snapped in half.
No one knows what happened to those vessels. The crew didn't survive. They disappeared.
If they're right, other bulk carriers may be in danger. Searching for a new lead, investigators find one in the port of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. It's here where the Flare's final voyage began.
We had to talk to the pilot in Rotterdam that had guided the ship out of Rotterdam.
Bill McConney, thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
Absolutely. How can I assist you?
Well,
the role of the pilot is to safely guide the vessel out of port. He was an important source of information.
I know it was a while ago.
Harbor pilots navigate thousands of ships out of this port each year. But something about the Flare stood out.
The Flare, yes. I do remember the ship. She was empty. Also remember she had a light forward draft on her.
A light forward draft means the bow of the ship floats high out of the water, perfectly safe when seas are calm, but in a storm, it can cause serious problems.
Picture a vessel as a teeter-totter. Then in this case, a 700-foot-long teeter-totter, and the bow teeter-totters or tips forward into the trough. It comes down with a bang.
Over time, this can damage the ship.
With the continual pounding through the waves, you get bending this way, then bending back that way. Bending this way, bending back that way.
Much like a paperclip being bent back and forth. It can start to fatigue and then crack and fail.
Investigators wonder if Flair's bow was riding too high in heavy seas.
Chief, decreasing speed to 5 knots.
And did the continual pounding ultimately cause it to snap? To reduce stresses to the hull in big waves, seawater is pumped into a ship's ballast tanks. The weight makes it sit lower in the water to provide a smoother ride in the waves.
Keep her on the starboard bow.
Investigators know the Flair left port in an extremely light condition. What they don't know is how much ballast the captain had added to the tanks just before the ship broke in half.
We knew she was empty, so how much ballast, where it was placed, was very important for us to find out.
They come up with an ingenious way to find out.
Look at how the ice is formed.
By looking at images of the Flair's main deck.
You see those square edges?
You can see where there is snow and ice patterns. And that was very valuable to assist us in determining ballast, because if you have water ballast, it contains heat longer than an empty air tank.
A ballast tank full of seawater retains enough heat to melt the snow that lands on its surface. Empty tanks will get colder and allow snow and even ice to build up on the decks above.
There's not enough seawater in these tanks.
You can see on the imagery where there is snow and ice because that tank was most likely empty.
Why go into a storm with empty tanks? It doesn't make sense.
As they search for an answer, something catches their attention. In Flair's last survey, most of the ship's ballast tanks were found to be severely corroded and in need of repair.
In particular, there were some repairs that were being done in some of the upper wing tanks, and that would require them to remove the ballast water in order to effect those repairs.
They'd been given what's known as a condition of class. That is a specific period of time in which they're allowed to continue to sail, but must have the repairs done.
They've only got weeks to get the repairs done.
That's a lot of pressure.
Captain has to think to himself, okay, what is the nature of the repair? Is it dangerous? Like, do I think that I should sail this ship? And in reflection, he makes the decision that we can do this.
With time running out, some repairs were to be done at sea, but the North Atlantic had other ideas.
The weather conditions they experienced, the heavy seas, the storm and near hurricane force winds would have made it very, very difficult to conduct any repairs on the voyage.
It's possible unfinished repairs meant some ballast tanks couldn't be filled and left the already empty ship pounding heavily through raging seas. Did the force of a massive wave simply rip the ship apart? A closer look at Flair's plans shows it was built to take the worst any ocean has to offer.
It was strengthened, its hull was strengthened to take ore. So this vessel was stronger than other bulk carriers at the time, yet it catastrophically failed while empty.
Searching for answers, investigators dig deeper into the ship's structure.
Maybe there was a problem that we couldn't see on the imagery, so we really are in a position now, you can't answer this unless you get eyes on the wreckage itself and analyze it.
Investigator John Garstang boards the Canadian Coast Guard vessel Earl Grey and ventures out to the sunken wreck of the flare's bow, about 145 kilometers off the coast of Cape Breton. He has an ROV equipped with a high-resolution video camera to scan the wreckage for clues.
We've only got a limited weather window, and we have to make the best of every minute we've got.
As the ROV goes into the water, Garstang knows this may be the investigation's last chance to find out what caused the flare to break apart. Investigator John Garstang watches the ROV descend towards the wreckage of Flare's bow section. Months of investigation hinge on whatever physical evidence he can find.
This is a risky operation because you're going on a wreck and there's cables and twisted metal and everything you can entangle on. We may all of a sudden lose a $100,000 vehicle in addition to accomplishing nothing.
76 meters below the surface, Flare's bow looms into view.
You never do get used to coming up on a wreck out of the dim and dark and then seeing this massive structure. And you cannot help but not be personally affected. Basically, you're at a gravesite, those who didn't make it.
The sunken bow has landed on the seafloor, nearly upside down.
It actually rolled and was upside down to show us the stuff we couldn't see when it was floating.
Okay, move in. Right there.
As the hull fracture comes into view edge on, Garstang sees a series of telltale markings within the thickness of the steel.
To our surprise, we start encountering clamshell marks, which are characteristic or indicative of fatigue cracks.
These small fatigue cracks have an identifiable clamshell pattern that can be caused by the continued flexing of steel over time.
Those lines that make up that series of concentric marks are actually crack arrest lines, where the crack would advance, stop, advance, stop, advance, stop in little increments, so it's slowly growing.
This could be where it all started.
Growing inside the steel, these fatigue cracks were all but invisible to Flare's captain and crew.
Here, there's more.
That we kept finding more cracks, then more cracks. They're small, but those crack patterns and cracks are ticking time bombs. All these cracks are starting getting bigger, joining, eventually joining to the point that they're critical in size. The analogy I could give you with glass, if you just put a thin scratch on the surface of that glass, once you have that, if you then have a shock loading, which is the pounding of the waves, the sudden bending, that combination can then suddenly create a rapid, fast fracture, so rapid that it's catastrophic.
The actual crack on board the flare would have started and propagated all the way around the hull in fractions of a second, literally at the speed of sound.
6 months after the sinking of the bulk carrier Flare, investigators have found their smoking gun. And signs of corrosion on some fatigue cracks reveal they may have been growing for years.
Maybe it might take a year, 2 years, those cracks slowly progressing, the right circumstances, and then catastrophic failure, as we saw in the Flare.
The Flare's crew didn't know it, but they left Rotterdam on a ship that was already primed to break apart.
Decreasing speed to 5 knots.
The pounding transatlantic voyage weakened it further, before the final storm near the Cabot Strait proved to be the knockout punch.
The ship was inspected, and it passed.
Flare had ultrasonic tests done on its hull, but the deadly fatigue cracks were never detected.
Now it brings into question, who did the inspection? How well is the inspection being done? Maybe it's a person whose equipment isn't what it should be. So this triggers a safety response with urgency. There's other vessels all over the world that may be in danger.
We gotta warn those other ships. Those cracks are like ticking time bombs.
The same type of hidden fatigue cracks that broke the flare could sink another bulk carrier at any moment. The question now, can investigators get the message out before it's too late? The flare investigators send an alert to flag states all over the world, warning of the danger posed by fatigue cracks in bulk carriers. The cracks are so small they can easily be missed by inspection.
There's a very large fleet of similar design vessels. Do they have cracks and we could tell them at locations that we're finding these?
The response is alarming. 14 bulk carriers, similar to flare, are immediately flagged as high risk.
2 vessels of similar design that come into Canadian waters, one of which was inspected, had cracks like the flare. If they were not found, just as they were not found in the flare, the same catastrophic thing could have happened to that vessel. So this was for me personally, and I know with the other team members, this is a big deal.
The need to improve inspections isn't the industry's only wake-up call. The night of the disaster, none of the crew were seen wearing immersion suits when they abandoned ship. The insulated neoprene suits are designed to help victims survive on the open ocean.
It's not uncommon for seamen or crew on ships to actually prepare themselves for an emergency like that. And I will say myself, I have been in situations where I've had my survival suit out of the closet just in case something happened.
Immersion suits are standard issue on Canadian ships, but other countries have different rules.
Thank you for meeting with me.
Chief Investigator Bill McConey travels to Greece to question the flare's owners.
I'd like to talk to you about the flare. In particular, I'd like to talk about the number of immersion suits.
There are 6 survival suits on board, as required by law.
25 guys. What are they supposed to do? Draw straws?
It was a bit of a shocker for me to learn that international regulations did not call for survival suits for all of the crew.
We're going to have to work on the law, and I'm hoping that you'll help me out.
With thousands of ships working bitterly cold oceans every day, investigators know the rules have to change, or more seafarers will die.
I'll be in touch.
To make their case, they use data on cold water survival developed for the Canadian military.
We use a computer model that can simulate the various scenarios. We could put information about water temperatures, air temperatures, the type of clothing that was worn, whether or not they had life jackets. Would these individuals have survived? Had they been given immersion suits?
They then compare the predicted survival times with or without a survival suit.
The individuals with lighter clothing would have survived around 2 to 2.5 hours. When we ran the model within immersion suits, survival times increased by 12 to 14 hours.
The results are no surprise. With immersion suits, more of the flare's crew would probably have survived.
You always hope that you can make a difference. Of course, there's the families too, a closure, like, what happened? Why did this happen?
The investigation and results of the survivability model are presented to the International Maritime Organization, demanding change.
The IMO and the 150 member nations agreed with us, and the rules were changed requiring 1 survival suit per crew member.
Sadly, in too many cases, you need a very tragic event with fatalities to create true change. The flare is part of a legacy of tragic events.
21 years after the tragedy, Romarlo and Cyrus meet once again.
Ano, kumusta na?
Ikaw yung...
Anong nangyari sa balbas mo?
Asa?
The two men survived a trauma they'll never forget, and it changed their lives forever.
My goal was by age 35, I wanted to be a chief engineer because that was my dream. Not anymore. I never went aboard a ship ever again.
Since then, they've enjoyed watching their families grow, but most of their crewmates weren't so lucky.
It should have been avoided. So I'm hoping that after the accident on the flare, the maritime industry should have had a lesson